All right, so here's a few news items that may be of interest. So Trump threatened to punish San Francisco for having homeless people, just like he said he would send all the immigrants here until they're accusing us of polluting the water by letting homeless people crap in the streets and put dirty needles, which will wash to the bay. And San Francisco vigorously claims that this is not true, which I assume it isn't. But Trump is a very interesting character. He's a very interesting example of authoritarian regimes and how they become successful. And he's following the playbook of Hitler and the ones before him, which I've been reading more and more books about. And I'm especially amazed by his latest activity of just totally admitting everything and doubling down and doing it in public. And this is the big lie technique, which Reagan was real good at, and the Soviet leaders were real good at. If somebody accuses you of something, just throw it back in their face 10 times louder with the strong authoritarian reassurance that this is okay, this is normal. And this is what the Stanford prison experiment was about. They thought, how could people turn into monsters and do terrible things? There must be something wrong with the Germans. That was the theory. So they wanted to do a research study in Germany to see what made Germans so susceptible to authority figures. But they couldn't get permission to do it in Germany, so they tried doing it at Stanford with Americans, and just had someone shocking people until they would die, and had a guy in a white cloak, lab jacket, telling you this is okay. And they found like most people would cheerfully do this. And they discovered that humans will accept anything, no matter how monstrous, if an authority figure tells them it's okay. And this, I think, shows something that, which we learned from this, which is that humans are herd animals. You just go with the herd. If the whole herd is doing something, you will just do it. Most people do not really have any much individual morality or principles or anything. They just blend in with the herd. And once you make something normal, everybody will just accept it. And I'm watching how enormously effective this is. This stuff, and I think I'm watching, what we have now is we have a Republican Party that wants government the way it was in the Middle Ages, where you have a king, you have an emotional love of the king, anything the king does is right, any criticism of the king is treason and evil and wrong, and the king certainly is allowed to promote his own self-interest and just put money in his own pocket, and his main concern is keeping his own power stable, and that is seen as the country. In France, they said this. They said the king is France, and the king's health is France's health, and anything that's good for the king is good for France. And this is a really old feeling people have had for governments. And, I think the Republicans are on board with that. And there was this American experiment to rebel against monarchy and have a different idea about government, but it was kind of hard to understand and unnatural. And they said from the beginning that this is a very interesting, strange concept, this democracy thing, but it's very fragile because it's not natural. People will fall back into just following the guy with the big antlers and doing whatever that one guy says. And we're watching it happen. It's very interesting. And that's why and what's funny is they asked the Republicans, who of you thinks that Giuliani is doing any good by going on these talk shows and just admitting more crimes and raving like a lunatic? They said, there's only one person over here that thinks he's helping us. But that's Trump. And the whole thing, he is the one man, he has a vision, and he has been proven right, that he knows what will sell. And I just heard another podcast about this. They said the problem in 2016 is they just asked people, what is the one word that makes you know what your candidate is doing and feel positive about them? And what is the one word they say that puts out their enemy? And Trump, what makes him good? Make America great again. What makes Hillary bad? Crooked Hillary. Let's see, what makes Hillary good? And they have like 20 different answers. Oh, a better tax plan or better civil rights. What makes Trump a bum? Oh, racist or like disorganized or a bad personality. He didn't make a simple message that fits on a bumper sticker. And Trump knows that. He knows how to sell things with a very simple message. And the answer when you're accused of being wrong is to scream louder. This is fine. This is normal. We should all just expect this. I'm going to do it every day and you're just going to get used to it. And that works. His approval rating has gone up. So we will see if this happens, but I'm watching it. And they say impeachment is not a legal process. It is a political process. And I'm frequently required to admit that Trump is right. And here he is right again. He says the problem is the Democrats didn't run a good campaign and that's why they lost. And he is so good at selling people crap that I think he's going to do it again. I think he's going to skate on this impeachment thing. And he is also correct that all the advisors around him with laws and theories and principles and everything just need to shut up and get on board with him just loudmouthly lying louder and louder, because that is the path to victory. And we will see. But his base has not moved at all. They still love it. It really works for a bunch of people. The only thing that could hurt him, I think, is if the Democrats actually care enough to get out and vote. And I think he is correct. and people have been voting on this for like 30 years, that Americans have no memory and they really don't care about anything. They'll get mad about something because it's fashionable to get mad about it this week, and next week they'll just be bored with it and tune to a different channel and it will be gone. So we will see. The Democrats actually get mad enough to vote, but I think they will have forgotten in a month, and we will see what happens. This is what the founders said. They said this democracy is a great thing if you can keep it, but it's very hard to hold on to it. And you have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting to stop this natural decay back into the other system. And that's what we're watching, the people fighting, but they fight in an ineffective way with logic and complicated rules like the multi-100-page Mueller report that nobody read. So it contains all kinds of useful facts, but they didn't do any good because they didn't sell them correctly. Anyway, it's a very interesting time to observe politics, although it's not like we've never been this divided before or this critically collapsing before. This has happened many, many times if you look at history. It happened around the New Deal, the Great Depression, it happened around Civil War. Many, many times we've had things like this. So anyway, Bill Barr is another person like the government of UK telling people not to encrypt their data, that it will ruin the security filters on the internet if you encrypt the data. So Firefox actually agreed not to use HTTP over DNS or HTTPS in UK, so their porn filter would keep working, looking for unencrypted URLs. And he also wants them to not encrypt data on Facebook until you prove that that doesn't make people more at risk because all the filters don't work. It is an interesting issue. And of course, the techies are all mad because technically you're better to encrypt it, but the legal people might possibly have a point. The same thing every company has. They don't want you making any VPNs or using any HTTPS directly to foreign servers because they want to be able to decrypt everything at the border and see if it's malware or confidential data leaving. So very few people are actually allowed to make direct encrypted connections anywhere at work. And many nations don't want you doing it either. It's an interesting issue. And the techies only see the mathematical side, but the policymakers just see the real consequences. Anyway, and this one I thought was important for the classes we're doing here. So Zendesk got hacked years ago, and they didn't find out for 3 years. This is very common. This is why people talk about the average time to detect a breach is 270 days. And this, I think, is highly, highly misleading. Like most of the political polls are misleading, because those are the people that ever noticed they were breached. Most people, I think, get breached and never know at all. And the only way they find out is if the FBI comes to them years later and say, we caught the bad guys and found it. So the question is, if the only way you knew a car was stolen is if they actually recovered it, you would probably think not very many cars get stolen. And that's the problem with data. People can steal your data and you don't know it. And I'm sure that's 90% of it. I mean, I can't prove it, of course. How can you ever prove that? But it's, I think it's much, much worse than what we can see. I think all the breaches we hear about are the tip of the iceberg. Anyway, this I thought was important. Everyone's getting hit by ransomware. It's a really big deal. And he talks about here how just backups are not simple enough. You actually have to have a DFIR plan. You have to have a whole plan where you have backups, they're stored somewhere, you have an organized way of using them to restore the systems, and you've got that all ready to go. And this is what you need for things like disasters and floods and fires too. And you need to plan that way for ransomware. Anyway, let me get to the, so here we are in 152. And as I mentioned, there's no project due next week because I did not get them ready in time. The next 2 projects, I'll have them ready in a day or so here, 304 and 305, and they'll be due in 2 weeks for that reason. All right, and so today, we are here at 6 and 7. Let me bring that up. That is 152. Okay. There we go. This one. All right. I don't care about your stinking update. All right. All right. So I guess I'll start with the big and we'll see how far that goes. All right. So the first thing you have to do when you discover some kind of security incident, like some threat detection thing, like an intrusion detection system goes off, or you otherwise have some reason you have been fortunate enough, unlike most companies, to actually detect that somebody is messing around with your network. So now the first thing is to gather the preliminary evidence and figure out what you're going to do about it. So you look at the original alert. One person will have reported something, and then you may well notice more because the person who reported it may not be very technical. They probably are not on your IR team. They probably saw some box pop up with an error message or something, and you might be able to see more. Then look around at related detection systems. If a IDS has picked something up, then there might be something on your firewall logs and on other machines and so on. So you're trying to figure out what exactly happened here, and your immediate desire is to find the size of the problem. How big is it? Is it still spreading? So you decide what sources you're going to use. And so the first thing you do is find something that's easy to analyze. Don't start analyzing a whole hard disk image or something. Find some simple thing like other antivirus logs or something that might quickly find it. So for example, you look for these simple indicators of compromise, like it creates a file on infected boxes. It creates a registry key that I can look for. It puts things in prefetch, which means that it ran some kind of executable. Everything you run on Windows is put in prefetch. The last 128 or so programs are always there, so they can be preloaded into memory next time you boot up, because Windows concludes that you apparently like these programs. And so anything recently run will be in there. You can look at browser history or network artifacts like firewall logs. All these are things you'll try to find indicator of compromise, which is easy to find. It's just sitting there in something simple like a log, and it's unique. It only applies to this malware, and it's not something that would appear on normal machines during normal operations. So it's not a false positive. So yeah, okay. So independent sources are important. So a firewall log is not connected to a registry key necessarily at all. The firewall log shows network traffic. The registry key shows a program running on a machine that changed something. So that would be good. Those would be like two-factor authentication, two independent verifications that something happened here. And that's, of course, more reliable to find independent sources to detect it. There. And that means if the attacker or the malware is trying to clean up its traces, it will find it much more difficult. For example, there are plenty of malware which doesn't put files on the disk or that deletes those files, but it still wouldn't be able to do anything about the network traces in the firewall. And that's the game. So you review these things. Now, your immediate concern, and the same thing would be true, for example, of a physical intrusion. I used to have this when I teach physical security, like in CISSP. I say, if you come to work and the door has been pried open with a crowbar and it's hanging open, and you're the first person there, what do? And the answer is call the cops or your security team, because the criminal could still be in the building. If you go charging in there to see what happened, now you might get shot or something. So the first question is there somebody still on your network, still doing bad things right now? And this is very likely when you have an intrusion. So your first issue is going to be to see if they're still doing something. Look, so once you find this malware is installed at a certain date, look what else was happening around that time, and see if you can figure out if they're still in there doing more harm. So you have to choose things that will move quickly. Take actions that will answer a question quickly and that are following evidence. Don't jump to a conclusion and follow just this one conclusion before you know anything. But this is, of course, the skill of research and detective work, is to somehow rapidly follow the promising leads and not waste your time on preconceived guesses. And we've all seen a lot of cop shows and detective stories talking about this. It is a certain way of thinking that you have to discipline yourself to. So consider these things. Are you using multiple independent sources of evidence? If you're not, you might be chasing a red herring. And I certainly do this a lot in capture the flag problems. I will have one idea how to do it, and it will get harder and harder, and I will just try harder and harder and dig deeper and deeper into this hole going the wrong way. It would be better to just stop and come at it another way. There's probably an easy way. Well, it's fun. One thing that's fun is to do a capture the flag and then read the official write-ups and say, oh my God, there was like a tool I could have run that would have found the answer right away. And I spent all day working on it because I was just doing it the wrong way. So check these things, see if you've overlooked something obvious. So here's some scenarios for it. So this is a large online retailer, and people are complaining that after they join your customer list, they're getting spam. Now, in the first place, I hear this all the time. This must be like the #1 thing. People come to me, oh my God, I've been hacked. My computer has an error message popping up. And I'm sure it happened after I bought something at this retailer, because then I started getting phone calls or something. I hear this all the time. In fact, when I was at RSA, one of the major famous lawyers in this business sat down at the table in the speaker room and said, every time, if I talk about shoes near my phone or my computer, I'll immediately start getting ads for shoes. They're listening to every word you say. And I said, no, they're not. Another person who's like one of the famous people in this business, yes, they are. They totally are. And I said, all right. this can't be true. They can't be listening to every word you say and targeting ads on it. But that would be easy to test. Actually, you could just have a scientific test where people read off a list of 10 words and then see if they get ads about that. And I said, maybe, nobody's ever done that. I said, well, I could set that up and have a student do that as a project. That would be pretty easy. And another guy said, you don't believe this garbage, do you? And I said, no, but we haven't tested it. And now I'm hearing more and more about Alexa and the smart thing on your iPhone. They really are listening to everything you say. They really are sending it up to the cloud. I'm not as sure this is garbage as I was when they first said this to me. I said, oh, that can't be true. And I said, if they did that, that would be illegal. But now in the last few months, the DMV is selling all your data just openly. The DMV is selling your data for money. Your television is recording everything you do and selling it to people for money. Chick-fil-A is recording your physical location and selling it for money, and everybody can just see it. I'm afraid I was wrong to laugh at this. Anyway, it would be an interesting thing to test. If someone wants to take this on, that would be an awesome project. Just take like 10 words, read them into a phone and see if you get ads on it, and then somehow take 10 words with your phone in airplane mode and show it doesn't happen again or something. Yeah.
I was looking for a used car and I started getting stuff from Facebook. You guys say, oh, who's the used car? Wait a minute.
I know. I know if I go on a website and read about something, then I'll see Google ads about that. Or if I send an email about it, that I understand. But they're saying if you just talk about it near your device, you'll get ads. And I'm afraid that I thought that was insane, but I no longer think that's insane. Well, it would be interesting to do a scientific test of it. See, where does malware typically install itself on Macs? I do not know. I've heard people say there's all this Mac malware. I haven't noticed any. So I don't have, and I've even run some Mac malware detection tools and stuff, and I haven't found any. I don't know. It's a good question. You know any?
I sometimes put it in the EFI partition.
In the EFI partition?
Yes.
That sort of affects you when you boot up?
Yes, yes. So, well, not to make it so it affects you boot up, just to make it so it's not apparent in the system.
Yeah.
The user local bin is world writable.
User local bin, yeah.
So that's always a good place to put stuff. Home directories could just, a little subdirectory in a home directory.
Well, this is good stuff. I know the only malware I've actually seen on Macs is like browser extensions, which is really simple to remove and things you can take off with MBAM. But I've heard many people say there's tons of Mac malware and your Mac is probably infected and you don't know it. You just don't have any tools to find it, which might be true. I'm not sure. I certainly don't protect my Mac in any way. Maybe I'm all infected. I know. I've seen your little notes on. Well, you get it the old-fashioned way by just using it when I walk away. But this is a very good question. And if anybody has like a way to actually detect some Mac malware or Mac malware projects, let me know. I should really throw some in. It is certainly possible to make targeted malware on the Mac, like you make. But as far as spreading viruses, I just don't hear much about it. Anyway, so people complain they get spam after they get in. So as I say, that might not convince you. They might just be paranoid, telling you that, and they don't really know that they're getting spam because they joined you. So now you could try working with the customers, but what I would probably prefer is make some fake customer accounts with unique email addresses. This is what honey tokens are. Make a few Gmail accounts, join your customer list and see if they get spam. That would seem like a good thing to do. Use something like random 64-character names because, of course, some spam actually just makes randomly generated names. So if you make a long random name that nobody's ever going to find, that only exists in this one place, and then if you get spam, it's pretty likely somebody is in fact harvesting your emails and sending spam. So, all right. So one possibility, someone would assume the customer data is being lost somehow. So you'd have to find out where it is. There's an internal database on a production server, and then there's a third-party database on some third-party site that's using your data. This is very common. In fact, almost everybody has much, much more sprawl than that. Their stuff is, in fact, on 5 or 10 different cloud services that they don't even really know about or monitor. I saw a chat message coming in. If you have some assistance on certain devices like Alexa. Yes, that's right. I think Alexa is listening all the time. And it would be actually very interesting to know if when you don't say, hey, Alexa, and it's supposedly ignoring you, if it still listens to everything and targets ads based on it. That is entirely possible.
Yeah. Because it does when you say, hey, Alexa.
Well, that means it has to be listening. But they could be ignoring everything until you say, hey, Alexa, or they could be targeting ads based on it. And that would be interesting to find out. Yeah.
Wouldn't this be really easy to test if you just had Alexa on a network?
Yeah.
You just set the network for, I know it's going to be encrypted, but Alexa's just sitting there doing nothing. It shouldn't be sending that much data.
Well, it has to. It has to send it, I think, up to the cloud to decide whether you said, hey, Alexa. And I know little children's teddy bears totally send the data up constantly to the cloud.
Then it is listening to
it is, but they might not be targeting ads. For example, Google's 888 DNS, they put it up, offered it to the world, and everyone said, oh my God, you're going to spy on everything and target ads. And they said, oh no, we promise we won't, like the NSA. We could, but we won't. And you have no way to verify that we didn't. So it's a question of your philosophy of how paranoid you are. Do you really think they're lying to us? That's a good, well, but there's so much money. You could make so much money from 888. You know what everybody's doing all the time. You could make a pile of money targeting ads based on that, and they would never know.
The government is recording everything.
Oh yeah.
And it's just piling up. They go, well, we'll listen to it someday.
Well, see, that's happening here. We're piling it all up in Utah, but we don't know how to dig through it. Anyway, yeah. What's that? Scary? I can't understand it. Scary? Siri. Yeah, what about Siri?
So when you say, hey Siri, do the same like.
As far as I know, it does, but I have no specific knowledge. I think Siri is listening all the time, and I think it has to send your data to the cloud to decide whether you said, hey Siri, but I'm not sure. Now, for privacy, it would be better if it somehow locally decided whether you said, hey Siri, and it only sends data up after that. But I think they don't design it with privacy in mind. They just design it for functionality. And the problem is voice recognition is actually pretty difficult. So it's a very good question. And, you know, I was just laughing at these people for being paranoid, and now I'm not so sure. So I don't know.
What was the question, Sam?
Well, we're talking about whether your phone is listening to everything you say and targeting ads based on it.
Probably.
That's what a lot of people have said, and I was mocking them for crazy people, and I'm not so sure anymore. They might be right. I remember when I was a kid, it was the hippies. They said, the man is poisoning everything. They're putting LSD in the water supply, and I said, you're out of your mind, and then they really were putting LSD in the water supply. A lot of these horrible things are really true. You say, it can't be that bad, but it is that bad.
You are the product, so everything is true.
Not everything, but there is some of every kind of abuse happening, and the question is, how much is it? Anyway, so they did interview results. They find that there's using a mainstream commercial product for customer management, and there's a big database there with 3 terabytes of data. So you might wonder how they could be stealing that stuff. So backups are off-site, and they receive data at the end of the month. So the marketing firm would probably not be the source, or all their other customers would be affected too. So that's a possibility. Intercepting the phone calls is pretty exotic. Now, phone calls are actually pretty easy to intercept in a targeted way. Kevin Mitnick did it. So it says SS7 they're using is ridiculously vulnerable, but you can't do a mass campaign that way. You have to do targeted one call at a time, so that's not usually effective. And if they were doing some kind of packet capture of all the traffic to the database server, that would be a ton of traffic, and it's probably encrypted. So stealing it by stealing the traffic is not a likely source. So here's some theories. You could have an insider stealing the data and selling it. This is, in fact, pretty common. It's very hard to catch, very hard to test. You could have some kind of modified code on the website to capture email addresses. This is also common, like Magecart. They put some extra JavaScript on your server so it steals an extra copy of the data the customer types in. That, in fact, happens pretty often. And you can try to do malware scans of your server or something, but that's certainly an issue. So you could test this, though, by sending data to the database that did not pass through the form by using an administration panel for the database. And then if those guys get spam, then you know that address was not stolen through the website. Someone could, in principle, be stealing your backup tapes. And the solution for this is a barium meal. This is a famous technique we used in espionage forever. Some famous actress like Paris Hilton did this. They had babies, and then some friend of theirs was leaking pictures to the media, so they gave different pictures each to their friends to see which one would be sold to the Inquirer, to know which of their friends was betraying them. And so that's what you do. You put some fake accounts on the backups, and now if somebody's stealing the backups, they'll get spam, and otherwise they won't. So that's how you can narrow these things down. So anyway, after a couple of weeks, you start getting spam to some of the fake accounts, and now you know what's going on. So I went to the fake accounts and the accounts manually in the database, so it's not the website, and it's not the backups. And now you can track things down. So either someone is directly accessing the database, or they have malware on the database server, or they have some kind of way to tap the network traffic that goes to the database server. So this is how you do it. This is just like all troubleshooting. You somehow cut the problem in half. Like you can't get to the internet, so it could be a lot of things. So first try pinging something from your machine that sees if the network card is working, if the router is working, and so on. So now we've narrowed it down to a few choices, and you can now try things. You might consider doing packet captures of everything, but that's expensive and big, and that's probably encrypted anyway. Just doing logging of the queries that go to the database server is far more practical. And this is where we get back to what was on the first slide. Don't do some complicated, baffling thing. Find something simple like a log file that will have data you need that you don't have to work too hard to get. So it is not very likely that they're stealing the raw data packet. What's more likely is they found something like SQL injection somewhere, and they're able to send queries to the server and get some kind of data off. So you'll probably find some unexpected queries going to the server. So that would be a place to look. So they create a few more fake accounts, talk to people, find out where the data is stored, look through the logs to see what logs look like for normal activities, and then see if you can find unusual ones, but they didn't find. And they also found that there's no bulk exports normally, so new accounts get spam, and they finally find a customer that says select email from customer profile where the sign-up date greater than equal to something. So somebody has the ability to, on a weekly basis, harvest the new accounts this week. So somebody has found some way to send an unauthorized, unexpected query to the database. And so here's the details. You find what IP it comes from, somebody in graphics arts who has no business doing this, and it uses somebody else's username. So now you're finally getting down to the back. So what happened here is they have no reason to be doing this. And so now you have much more information. Now you know where it's coming from. So maybe there's malware on that machine. Maybe this person has been bribed. Maybe their computer has been stolen or something like that. So you got people getting spam, a 2-week cycle, queries are made over the network, and you have located the place where it comes from. So you can go here, you can now collect the live response of that one machine to see what processes are running on it, and interview the user and find out the usual thing. Are there signs of infection? Has the machine been acting strange? Is it really left on all the time? Like after you go home, maybe somebody else is using it. And so then they go to the database server and do a live response. We're not imaging the whole hard disk in either case. We're doing a normal live response, and a normal live response is all the network connections, all the registry keys, a list of files, and things like that. You run a few normal commands that give you just general information of the status of the machine, and all the logs, of course. Preserve all the logs of these things. And okay, now you can go to the workstation, and you can find malware on the workstation. So they found persistent malware connecting from a foreign IP that's been there for 2 years. And this, I think, is extremely common, like we just found from that company. Many people are owned for years before they find out. And many endpoint devices, I heard when we had the big scandal here, claiming our machines were infected with viruses, I looked, and that was maybe 8 years ago. And at that time, this number was 11% of corporate desktops have malware on them. This is very, very common, and that's why we moved to zero trust networking. Microsoft, before 2002, Microsoft's official recommendation was you have a boundary router and you trust everything inside there, and you keep everything out with any malware on the one boundary system. That was the trusted network environment. And in 2002, Microsoft said that was no longer plausible, and they're certainly right. And now you cannot trust any devices. You can't trust the workstations, the laptops, the cell phones that people bring in from home. Some portion of them are infected, and you should plan for that. And that's certainly the case. So they're unable to determine how it was compromised, of course, because if it's been infected for 2 years, then you probably exceeded as far as any of your logs or anything go. And so you can examine each computer for indication of compromise and look at your firewall logs to see if other people are receiving traffic from that IP address or have signs of infection, and that will solve that one problem. All you have to do is reimage that one machine, and the immediate problem is solved. But this is not all that reassuring. How do you know it's not going to happen again? And the answer is you probably don't. All you can do is block that particular piece of malware. And so at an organizational level, I would like to see a review of maybe we need to buy a better IDS brand or add another filter on the network or something. Maybe we need to consider some improvement in our security posture to lower the chance of this happening again. But in fact, everybody's pretty much a sitting duck for this. This is what all the pen testers do. Just send spam to people. It is very easy to infect one workstation. Just write some stuff like a PowerShell script that will not be detected by any virus, send spam to people, somebody will click on it, and now you've got control of one endpoint desktop. This is almost impossible to avoid. So you have to plan for that and have further inspections and layers of security on your network. Anyway, So here's things you could do wrong. You could start searching all the computers for unique strings in the customer data, trying to see if some machine in here has been stealing those email addresses. But you don't know that the company data was stolen and put on the company server somewhere. And you don't know that it was stolen in a large file of data. And in fact, it wasn't. This thing was stealing just the email addresses once a week in one query, which is like what the Chinese did to Google. The Chinese put persistent malware in Google systems in 2010, and they stole the data, and they did not just send large files back. They carefully made small files that were encrypted and mixed with other traffic to go slowly back to their exfiltration server. This is the right way to do it. So it would just fit in normal traffic. There was not a large pile of data going to one place, obviously. Yeah.
Does that work for like if it's like NSA or any other government type thing, military? Will they be able to address it quickly and efficiently, or does?
No, absolutely. This is a very good question. You would like to think that the NSA and the military and Lockheed Martin and Google and stuff are safe, and the answer is emphatically no. Tests over and over and over again show they are in fact getting owned, they're getting hacked, stuff is getting stolen, they're doing the best they can. Google is the leader. They're the only ones that noticed. All 30 major American companies have been hacked for years. Google's the only one that noticed their data being stolen. But it happened for a while before they caught it. In fact, now what you notice, of course, are the low-level attackers, like people that send the same file to a million machines. You catch them with antivirus and you catch some of the others. But the real skilled attackers, like the nation states, they're getting in, just like your personnel contains foreign spies that are stealing your secrets and sneaking them out of the country. And they caught another one last week in Fremont, another Chinese spy smuggling around sticks. They catch them all the time. So a bunch of them they haven't caught. You know your people contain spies. You should also know your computer systems contain spies. That is just the fact of life. You can't get it to zero. You just try to contain the damage so you can keep going. But absolutely, they are not completely safe. They're doing what they can, though. And the part that has always been the hugest problem is the human problems. This is why Snowden terrified the US community. What if one of our trusted people betrayed us? You'd be doomed. They have the passwords, they have they have access to everything. You can't possibly, and you don't know that they aren't hiding CDs in their bag and leaving with company data and doing bad things with it. And how could you know? Nobody has a good answer for this. I think I mentioned before, the NSA runs polygraphs now every 3 months on all their employees, which is really bad for morale. But how can you do it? How do you know that your own people aren't betraying you? It's tough.
It's tough to know who's who. That's the thing.
It is, and they try to detect changes in behavior, like they have unexpected money, they seem upset, they're drinking more, they're playing games on the job. But I would call this normal life. People go through periods when they're less motivated, more grouchy, fighting with my wife, things happen that make you act differently. It doesn't mean you're going to betray them.
Yeah.
And so how do you know? Anyway, all right. So another unwise path would be to focus on insiders, like I say. Yeah. You had something? Okay, that's right. So yeah, insiders, of course, insiders are a thing you can worry about. The problem is, what can you do? And if you don't have a clear path to victory, you're just going to alienate your own employees and make them feel miserable. Now you tell them, we don't trust you, we're spying on you, we're putting a Bluetooth device on you to record your every move to see if you're sneaking off to the bathroom too much or something. People are going to hate you more for doing this, and then they will betray you. So it's just a problem. You can read personnel files, try to pick out who's suspicious. I've had this happen at college. I was teaching a class in one of their classrooms, and some students started downloading Harry Potter movies on BitTorrent on the campus, which of course is very attractive because you have a nice fast internet and you totally won't get blamed for it because it's on the campus network. So we got DMCA takedown notices, and they said he went to this IP address at this time. So it was like one of our classrooms, like during my class or during another class. And one of the teachers immediately said, it's that guy, that rotten guy. I hate that guy anyway. He's like suspicious and rude in class. It's the one. I said, dude, don't go here. You don't know it's that guy. I know you hate that guy, but this is not how you find the guilty party, by just taking the guy you hate and blaming him. And I couldn't get too far with this argument. I said, man, I thought this was a fundamental principle of law enforcement that people knew, but they didn't. They said, oh, I know who it is. They're always giving you trouble. They're doing something weird back there. I said, well, it could be them, but you don't know. Anyway, it's a big issue. All you're going to do is feed people's bigotry and drive people and make cliques where people know, oh, I'm not cool. They all hate me. They're going to blame me for the next bad thing at the company. I better steal some data and go to another company. Anyway, so you got witch hunt, and everybody, all you do is make a mess, and you probably don't fix the problem this way. You probably just create more problems. Another one like this that was funny was in Pennsylvania. About 6 years ago, they gave laptops to high school students. And when they did this, they were very, very concerned that the high school students would steal the laptops. So they put spyware on the laptops that could turn on the microphone and the camera and find the physical location without telling anybody. And then they recorded videos of what the students were doing with the laptops. And then they had pictures of students like having sex and smoking weed in their bedrooms at home. And then they tried to prosecute for that. And their parents said, wait, you were turning cameras on, recording them at home without their permission, without telling the parents, and they had huge lawsuits and millions of dollars and people getting fired and a worldwide scandal. And it would have been so much better to just let them steal some of the laptops. That would have been a much smaller problem than the attempt to prevent it, which created a huge disaster. This is very common, that your foolish security measure makes things 10 times worse. Like Trump, right? He calls the foreign leaders, he pressures them to do something that's probably illegal, and then he makes a big deal of moving it to the ultra top secret server, which scares the insiders so much they make a whistleblower complaint. This is almost always the case. The cover-up is much worse than the actual crime. The cover-up is what gets you in big, big trouble. Anyway, so another unwise path, you decide data's on a database server, so you have to actually analyze all the RAM on the database server to hunt for malware or something, and that's of course insane because the database servers are really big and busy, and that's a huge job. I say back at the very first slide, we were talking about this. Don't find something massively difficult and start there. Start with something that's simple, like a log file, a registry key list, something that's not ridiculously huge. Don't go to the big, complicated, baffling job unless you have to. All right, so again, they've jumped to a conclusion and they've gone down a path that's going to be a lot of work without having any sufficient evidence that it's really necessary. So here's another one, automated clearinghouse fraud. So they found a transfer. This happened to a lot of people. Somebody tried to transfer a huge amount of money and it was unauthorized. This went to an unexpected account, so it was flagged by their fraud prevention system. I've had Allison Miller as a guest here. She's bloody awesome. The Visa and MasterCard protect credit card payments by detecting suspicious transactions, and they are very good at it. And Allison Miller is actually a mathematician, I think a PhD in math or something. She studies game theory, which sounds hopelessly abstract, but it's not at all. This is exactly what it's about. How do you pick the suspicious traffic and figure out? So they actually hold fraud down to 0.5%, and I recently heard 0.1% entirely with server-side controls, because until recently, American credit cards had no protection at all. You used the same number for every transaction, so every single person you ever used the card with could just submit additional transactions at any time, and they could steal the carbon paper out of the trash can and do it again. So you're basically handing blank checks to everybody around you, and all prevention is on the server side, figuring out which transactions are unusual and fraudulent, and they are very good at it. So anyway, they detected one here, and they found the CFO is making a huge transfer to an unexpected place, and they didn't authorize it. So somebody is committing fraud, so they found it was done online using the CFO's banking account, and it was initiated a day ago, and the source IP address was your company's gateway. So it would appear that somebody really made that request from company property using the CFO's password. So your firewall, look at the firewall logs and the CFO's laptop machine. These are places you might want to look to make sure the traffic really came from the company, to see if the request really came from that machine. So the firewall logs show that 2 computers logged in via HTTPS from 2 IPs. One is the CFO's and the other is not immediately recognized. So we want to get forensic evidence from that machine, live response, RAM, and a hard disk image is what they did here, which because they're worried. Of course, this is a huge financial loss and somebody might go to prison. So as the Uber speaker talked about, for legal reasons, you now want a full legal record because you might really be sending somebody to prison. So you really better image the whole hard disk in this case. You may not want to analyze it thoroughly right now, but you want to preserve all the evidence for possible future examination. And then track down the other IP to find out what's going on. So you look at your DHCP logs, get the MAC address, and you find that it's the CFO's laptop. Now this guy, okay, so the CFO's desktop computer is involved and the CFO's laptop is involved. So now, one possible path would be to actually determine the CFO does in fact appear to be betraying us and stealing the money. That's an option. So you got to interview the CFO, and this is where people skills are super important. Now you somehow have to interview a high executive that you're beginning to have bad thoughts about, but you don't want to like offend them. This is why if you pay $100,000 for in-case Enterprise Edition, it includes the ability to do a complete image of a machine's hard drive and network over the network quietly without anybody knowing. It can push an agent onto the machine over the network silently and run it. And while you're working, it's collecting all the data. Because if you're going to do something like this, inspect a C-level executive, you probably want them to never know it happened. If you don't actually have unable to arrest them, you don't want them to ever know you inspected them. At the college got mad at me about 8 years ago, and they put malware on my office machine, and they put lockdown for tracking software on it because they wanted to block it. It took down my website and the college servers, which is part of why I moved off them. And they were incredibly clumsy about it. I totally found this malware recording everything I did. I said, well, you know, that machine sucks anyway. I'll get my own laptop. But this helped reinforce my general contempt for all the authorities around here. These guys are bums. They do stupid things without even telling me this. They're untrustworthy and invasive, and it's clumsy. Clumsy to inspect people in this fashion. Anyway, so they interview the CFO, and they find he had a meeting, and he used the wireless network, and he did access the website, but he did not use online banking, and he said he didn't do the transfer, and he doesn't know anything about it. So here's the story. You have firewall logs. The CFO denies all knowledge, and you have live response data and complete image of the CFO's computer. So here's some theories. Maybe somebody sneaked in their office and used their computer, like what keep happening to me, because he just leaves it open and walks out of the room. That's certainly an option. So you might look at security cameras, or maybe you have some door logs. Maybe there's undetected malware, so somebody can have remote access. Now you can certainly check for that in your forensic data. So the office space is open. So in this case, it's unlikely somebody could go in there unobserved. This is a question of company policy. There was an event about 10 years ago, I think when Microsoft Server 2003 or 2008 came out. They came and had an official Microsoft event here. We had like 5 classes go to a big room with like 300 people. We watched a presentation from a speaker, and one of them was a guy who had a new laptop, and he put it on the table right in front of the speaker being charged. 300 people watched the talk. Somebody stole it. He got up, it was gone. Somebody walked right into a room with 300 people, grabbed somebody else's laptop, and walked out the door. Nobody saw anything. It's all in, Kevin Mitnick knows this, social engineers know this, it's all in your presentation, in your body language. If you don't act suspicious, nobody will even see you. There's a famous video online where they have people playing basketball, and some guy in a bear suit rides a unicycle right through them, and you don't even see him because you're looking at the basketball to count how many times they bounce it. This is the thing about human attention. The world has too much data. You have a reticular formation in your brain, I think it is, that filters the data. And so you have this thing called attention, where you focus on the important thing and you block out all the unimportant stuff. You are ignoring like 99% of all the data at all times. And if you know how to use this, you can get away with murder. You can do something right in front of people and they won't even see it because it looks normal. So I'm not so sure about this, that even if it's in plain sight, nobody could go in there unobserved, but maybe in your company culture. Anyway, so they found a persistent executable, which is a version of banking malware on his machine. So now you're getting down to, I think, the point. Somebody managed to infect his machine and remote control it. And so now you can do a forensic examination of that machine, find out how it was infected, examine it, find things, look at firewall logs to see how the malware came in, and perhaps if other machines are infected too. All right. So here's things you might do. Since there are no antivirus alerts, this is a fairly common belief. I don't know if anybody still has this belief, but up to maybe 3 years ago, there were a large number of people that believed that antivirus is very effective and it stops all the malware. So if the antivirus is not going off, there is no malware around. Now, penetration testers will laugh at this, but there was a time when people really believed that antivirus was keeping their system clean. And if you happen to believe that, then you would say it must be like someone betraying us at the bank. So they said it can't be anyone at our company. They said the bank must have an intruder and you have to go lock up somebody. Somebody stole the money from the bank. But there's no way to tell this is true. And this is, of course, the big weakness. They're assuming that their security measures would detect a local problem if you had one. And that is just ignorant. If you imagine that your IDS and firewall and antivirus is stopping everything, you're just a fool. Any good pen tester could tell you that it is really easy to blast right through all that stuff without triggering it. So that's an issue. And while you chase a wrong lead, you're losing your data. So another unwise path is the CFO must have done it. They appeared guilty. They obviously betrayed us. So now we have to mess around trying to inspect a C-level executive, and that's of course going to lead to a world of trouble. All right, so that's the game. And of course, if you do have a human detective job to be done, then it's no longer really for an incident response team or malware analyst. This is not a technical issue. At this point, you need like a real human type detective or something. Anyway, so that should be chapter 6, and I should have some Cahoots. Let's go to Cahoots. And go here. And get past their attempts to make me pay. And find Cahoots. There they are. Favorites. Okay. 152, chapter 6 is here. Okay. Is it really chapter 6 or chapter 5? It is indeed chapter 6. Okay. All right. All right, we don't have very many people. I'll wait a few more seconds, but that might be all we're going to get. 7. All right. Ah, I see. Well, he who dies with the longest name wins. So this seems suspiciously unlikely to be true. I would assume you'd be one of these, but that's hiding in plain sight. Right? So it won't let you in. See if one of your technical experts there can give you a hand. Did you go to kahoot.it? Website should work. You might have to join the guest network. Still can't get in? You get on the internet?
Yes.
You got to Kahoot? Did you get to Kahoot.it?
No.
Download the app.
The app works better? Okay.
I assume.
Well, I'm not in a hurry. I'm going to pause the recording. Right. So, all right. Yes. Okay. Coke hires you to perform IR, and they're sure Pepsi did it. So what should you do? Right? This is, by the way, extremely common that someone hires you and they give you orders that are wrong. And you have to deal with this. Like I say, people will come to you and say, I'm sure I've been hacked, whereas in fact, they just have a malware infection or something, or they just have made a mistake on how to operate their software. So this is the problem with this business. You can't just do what you're asked to do. Often you have to educate the customer about how they're on the wrong track, which is another one of those things that requires good people skills. Yeah.
Oh, are you recording again?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Good. Yes, thank you for reminding me, but I'm pretty sure I am. I am, in fact. Good. Things are actually right. Okay, good. So it's seek alternate theories is what you need. This is you shouldn't start with one theory like that. That's not the way to do it. That could be true, but you have to consider all the alternatives first.
Always keep an open mind.
Yeah, yeah. And remember that the person, all right, so Mint gets hacked. This totally happened 2 years ago. They've compromised Mint. So what should you do? People are currently downloading infected files. Yep. Yes. In this case, you have to do something right away because right now customers are downloading infected files. So even before worrying about exactly what happened, you should do something about that. Like block all downloads, take down the servers, put up a message saying, oh my God, stop downloading Mint until we figure out what happened here, things like that. This is what they call exigent circumstances in law enforcement. There is an emergency, so don't just follow standard procedures, but take an immediate action to stop the damage. All right. So your database server logs have suspicious queries and the administrator wants to image the SAN. So what should you do? Yeah. Obviously, this is what I say, go find some better source of evidence. Imaging the SAN is insane. That's hundreds of terabytes. That's not getting you anywhere. That's just digging you into a deep hole. You have to find something more practical to do, like log files or network traffic or something that is not enormously huge. Even if that unthinkable action might someday be necessary, you want to do something simpler first and try to avoid all that work. So your CEO demands that you hack the attacker back. This also happens frequently. So what should you do?
What would I do? Or what should I do?
Well, well, that's an interesting issue of discussion. I would quit. I did, in fact, quit. I went to, when I was given instructions like this, I went and said, I can quit. I can get another job. You can hire somebody else if you're going to do things like that.
What if you ask the CEO to have a writing in forms that, you know,
To have a what?
writing that you will not be, you know,
Yeah,
charged anything?
they can't. That's a very important issue. Suppose the CEO puts in writing, I authorize this, it's okay. That still doesn't do any good because you hack somebody else like Yahoo, they prosecute you. Your CEO does not have the authority to give you the right to hack Yahoo. He might think he does. This is a big issue. Like in the president ordered people to do things that are illegal. Nixon did this. Trump did it too. Nixon and Trump both made the same decision to fire the people that were prosecuting him. Nixon fired the special prosecutor and Trump fired the head of the FBI. In both cases, because they didn't want to be investigated for crimes they were actually guilty of. And in both cases, they ordered underlings to fire them. And those underlings just quit and said, I'm not going to perform this illegal act. I will just quit. And they had to take a second underling to go fire that guy. This is very common. You're in a chain of command and you get an illegal order. And you are still liable for it, even if your boss authorized it. And I went and told my boss, I said, I'm not going to, I went to my second in command, I had a better relationship with it. And I said, the boss just ordered me to break the law and I'm not doing it. I can get another job. And he went and talked him out of it. But if he hadn't, I would have just walked.
I thought the question was like somebody hacked you, protect back.
If you get hacked by somebody, and many people do like to hack back, you hack the person that hacked you, which is what, by the way, Google did. China hacked Google, so Google hacked into China and stole the data back. That was completely illegal. As a matter of fact, that was the same crime that China did against them. And the Secret Service told them this is illegal and you shouldn't do it. But they chose not to prosecute. But in fact, there are people that think this is great and do it. And across national boundaries, they often get away with it because people don't have much of a unified court to prosecute. But in general, this is not something anybody reputable would much want you to do. Yeah.
What if you ask the boss to indemnify you?
That's exactly the same issue. The only thing the boss can do is indemnify you against company actions. Like he can promise, I won't fire you for doing this, but he can't make it legal. You can still be prosecuted for doing it.
So when the boss indemnify you, the company will pay for all the expenses.
You might possibly have the company pay for your lawyers, but you still go to jail. That's not necessarily a good deal. That's right. And the boss might go down with you. But the fact is, the boss doesn't have the authority to authorize you to hack some third party. Now, of course, people do. There's lots of crime all the time. So other people say, oh, who cares? I'll just use Tor and I'll get away with it. And that's an option. And that's accepting a certain level of risk. And like I say, Cloudflare considered this. When I gave a talk at DEF CON with the Cloudflare CEO, they had a huge denial of service attack and they couldn't block it. And one of his employees wrote a script and said, I could bounce it back to them and take them down with this script. And he said, I called my lawyer. And my lawyer didn't just say no. He said, well, maybe I could find some way to skate that by. Ultimately, we didn't do it, but we might have. We considered it. But if you're going to do something crazy like this, you need to talk to your lawyer and say, is there some way to perhaps not go to jail for doing this? And then you might, but you don't want to do these things casually, because you're certainly placing yourself in some legal jeopardy by doing something like this. And you shouldn't just do it casually. You should carefully plan whether you really want to accept that much legal risk.
But what's if your job's on the line, if you don't do it, they fire you?
Yes, that's why quitting is good. That's why it's really important not to be too attached to a job. And this is what happens to a lot of people. Like many people in the Trump White House have made it extremely clear that they are aware that they are doing terrible things and hurting their reputation, and yet they don't want to quit because they want the job, or they think maybe some good will come out of it. It is very common when you're working for a bad organization for a crazy boss that you are in this position of, can I afford to lose this job? What's it going to do to my future career? It's a tough one.
What if he really is the king?
Well, if he is, then staying with him forever is the answer. If he really is the king, stay with him, be loyal to him, and you'll ride to glory. Yes, that's an option. And I think that's what they're betting on. He'll push all this away, become the real leader. Everyone will cheer for him, and you'll be glad you stuck with him. That could be. That's certainly what the guy in Estonia, whatever Soviet bloc country he was just dealing with. Ukraine. The guy in Ukraine made it clear he's thinking, I better just butter up this guy and try to do whatever he wants. That's, from his position, that certainly is the right move. Not oppose him, not criticize him, not argue with him, just try to acquiesce. Yeah, that's right. So that's a big issue. You go along. So anyway, let's see. I've got someone pretending to be Caitlin here. And M. Hino is actually a name I understand. And this other one, who's that? Abdul?
No, I was the $sign.
Okay, who's the M?
That's not me.
Well, if anybody wants points, like, oh, here comes somebody. Somebody maybe telling me who they are. Oh, good. That's actually more or less close to his name. Okay. All right, good. So I got those recorded. So we're up to an hour. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll do the next bit. So I'm going to stop this recording and make the second one a second recording. We'll pick up at 7:10.